Adventure bikes got bigger and heavier for years, but the average adventure ride did not. Most miles are still pavement, back roads, and a few rough sections that look easy until you are tired, loaded, and trying to turn around on uneven ground. Manufacturers are reacting to how people actually ride, not how brochures sell. Smaller does not mean weaker. It means steadier control when traction changes, easier recovery when mistakes happen, and less stress baked into every detour. In this video, I'll show what changed and why the big bike formula stalled. Stay to the end, because this shift will change how you buy, what adventure bikes were originally built to do. Adventure motorcycles began as tools for distance when roads refused to cooperate. Early designs assumed dust, potholes, washboard, and long stretches where help was unlikely. Riders expected to fall over, stand the machine back up, and continue without drama. Frames were straightforward, controls were obvious, and parts were chosen for survival rather than spectacle. The goal was never domination. The goal was reach, cover ground, arrive intact, and keep moving even when the map stopped being polite. That mindset shaped every decision. Manageability mattered more than bravado. A motorcycle had to feel friendly when tired, predictable when loaded, and forgiving when mistakes happened far from home. Repairs were expected, not feared. Simplicity allowed owners to understand their machines and trust them over long days. Adventure meant access to places that cars avoided, not a performance staged for an audience. Riding culture reinforced this approach. Stories centered on distance covered and problems solved, not speed achieved. Success was measured by arriving under your own power, learning from the road, and turning back only when conditions demanded it. The machine existed to serve the journey, not challenge the rider's identity. This balance did not vanish through neglect or incompetence. It came by from practical needs and honest expectations that held for years, quietly shaping routes and plans. That groundwork waited as outside forces began nudging the category toward a different direction over time now. How competition reframed the idea of capability. Competition introduced a new ruler for judging capability, and it arrived wearing racing colors. Success in harsh events became shorthand for credibility everywhere else. Images of speed and endurance compressed complex riding into simple symbols that traveled well. If a machine could survive extreme stages, it must be serious. That logic spread quickly. As comparisons intensified, numbers took center stage. Output, travel, and capacity became proof of intent. Bigger components signaled authority before a wheel turned. Catalogs and coverage rewarded escalation, because escalation photographed cleanly. Progress was described as more, taller, and stronger, each step presented as necessary. Capability became something you could list rather than feel. The shift altered how motorcycles were discussed. Stories focused on winning narratives instead of lived use. Features multiplied because features were visible. The language of competition crept into everyday riding until seriousness sounded identical to excess. None of this happened in isolation. It reflected incentives, attention, and the desire to stand apart in crowded markets. Riding habits, however, changed slowly. Most journeys remained ordinary, stitched together by pavement, gravel, and uncertainty. The expectations riders carried did not escalate at the same pace as design targets. Machines advanced according to spectacle, while use stayed grounded. Over time, the gap widened between what was celebrated and what was required, setting the stage for consequences that arrived quietly. The machines changed faster than riding habits did everywhere. If this breakdown is helping you rethink what adventure means, support the work by liking this video, subscribing for future analysis, and sharing your perspective below. Your experience adds context, challenges assumptions, and keeps these conversations grounded in riding today. When capability became conditional, capability gradually became conditional, tied to moments when everything aligned. Perfect surfaces, clear sightlines, and rested bodies formed the new baseline. Outside those windows, tolerance narrowed. Small errors no longer ended as lessons. They arrived with consequences that lingered. The machine asked for commitment before offering forgiveness. Everyday situations absorbed the cost. Tight turns demanded preparation. Slow maneuvers required focus that drained energy early. Stops and starts accumulated mental load. The ride shifted from curiosity to calculation as attention spread across outcomes instead of terrain. Planning replaced improvisation. These demands did not announce themselves loudly. They appeared as subtle hesitations. A pause before turning down a side road, a choice to avoid a loose section late in the day. Routes grew conservative, without anyone declaring defeat. The experience remained impressive, yet less playful. What made the change durable was its invisibility. Nothing seemed broken. The motorcycles performed exactly as designed, under the right circumstances. Riders adapted quietly, managing risk through restraint. Over months and seasons, behavior adjusted while pride stayed intact. The tension settled in, unnoticed by headlines, shaping decisions long before anyone spoke about it openly. That pressure did not force immediate change, yet it accumulated steadily, influencing choices, reshaping expectations, and normalizing caution until admiration for the machines exceeded the desire to use them freely, preparing the ground for a disconnect that few wanted to acknowledge over time alone. If this is making you rethink what capable really means, check the description for gear and accessories that improve control without adding complexity. The gap between admiration and use. Admiration filled the space where use once dominated. Motorcycles earned praise for their presence, their promise, and their potential. Conversations highlighted specifications and achievements, while actual miles accumulated slowly. Ownership became aspirational, measured by capability implied rather than exercised. The segment appeared healthy, confident, and successful from the outside. Decision-making followed that pattern. Routes were selected for certainty. Detours were filtered out early. Exploration waited for perfect days that rarely arrived. The safest option felt reasonable, even responsible. Over time, riding schedules narrowed without complaint. The machines inspired respect, yet that respect kept them at a distance. None of this suggested failure. Sales continued. Coverage remained enthusiastic. The category projected strength through scale and complexity. What changed was the relationship between rider and motorcycle. Use no longer defined value. Possibility did. That subtle shift allowed satisfaction without friction. The real issue stayed hidden because it lived beyond marketing. It surfaced when pavement ended, daylight faded, or fatigue set in. In those moments, admiration offered no assistance. Choices became conservative, not from lack of desire, but from accumulated cost. The disconnect did not announce itself with numbers or statements. It revealed itself quietly, where intention met reality and where the trail, not the brochure, delivered the verdict. Recognition arrived later, when riders compared notes and realized admiration alone never carried anyone farther than the ground allowed on difficult days ahead, eventually everywhere. Momentum becomes the primary constraint. Riding off pavement reveals a constraint that appears before fear or doubt. Momentum governs decisions long before intention does. Once rolling, the machine prefers continuity, asking for planning rather than reaction. Lines are chosen earlier. Inputs are spaced farther apart. The ride becomes about managing what is already moving, not about changing direction at the last second. Corrections demand commitment. A half decision rarely stays small. Lean, throttle, and brake choices must agree, or they magnify each other. When timing slips, recovery costs distance and energy. What felt flexible at speed tightens when space narrows. The rider adapts by thinking ahead, scanning farther, and avoiding abrupt changes. Small misjudgments amplify because conditions rarely repeat. Gravel shifts, ruts appear, and traction varies corner to corner. Each surprise adds to a running calculation. Momentum rewards smoothness and punishes indecision. As a result, riding becomes anticipatory. The mind moves ahead of the front wheel, budgeting effort and choosing exits early. This behavior is not cautious by nature, it is practical. Anticipation preserves flow and reduces penalties when surfaces change. Over time, it becomes habit, shaping posture, pace, and patience. The ride feels composed, yet less spontaneous. That trade defines how decisions are made when conditions refuse to cooperate, setting up the next complication, waiting quietly. That reality reshapes pacing, stamina, and planning across long days without ever announcing itself clearly. Power complicates this further. Output that arrives too fast. Output arriving quickly changes priorities at low speeds. Precision replaces urgency. Small throttle movements matter because surfaces offer limited margin. The rider feeds input deliberately, knowing that excess cannot be recalled once delivered. Control comes from restraint rather than speed. Overcorrection becomes the risk. When response overshoots, the fix often overshoots as well. A series of reactions replaces one clean decision. Stability suffers as attention splits between hands and ground. Smoothness, not force, keeps progress intact. Assistance systems may step in, but attention shifts when they do. Indicators flash, responses soften, and the rider listens for changes instead of reading terrain. Focus drifts from the path ahead to the interface beneath gloves. That trade costs awareness at the wrong moment. Terrain reading competes with settings because both demand thought. Choices that once felt instinctive now involve selection. The ride slows mentally, even if pace holds. Over time, riders simplify their approach, seeking setups that disappear into the background. The goal becomes predictable response. When output matches intent, confidence grows without discussion. Progress feels calm, repeatable, and measured. That preference influences planning before the engine even warms, shaping where the day leads next. Over miles, the rider favors consistency, avoiding surprises, conserving attention, and selecting paths that reward steadiness rather than sharp reactions under fatigue as days lengthen and concentration thins near dusk alone, often quietly. This changes how routes are chosen, how risk management alters. Exploration. Risk management reshapes exploration in subtle ways. Sections are bypassed not because they are impossible, but because they are optional. The rider weighs reward against recovery and chooses continuation over display. Exploration narrows through a series of reasonable decisions. Days shorten to conserve margin. Fatigue becomes a factor earlier as attention stays elevated. Breaks lengthen. Stops arrive sooner. The route adapts to preserve energy for what remains. Nothing dramatic occurs, yet the map quietly contracts. Energy shifts toward managing outcomes. Effort goes into positioning, timing, and prevention. The ride feels organized, almost professional. Curiosity yields to efficiency. Progress continues, but improvisation fades as the priority becomes finishing well. Calculated riding carries benefits. It reduces surprises and protects equipment. It allows consistent pace across mixed surfaces. However, it also alters motivation. The rider plans around limits instead of discovering them. Choices become predictable because unpredictability costs too much. Over time, these habits influence what counts as a good day. Distance matters less than smooth completion. Stories focus on avoidance as much as accomplishment. The ride remains satisfying, yet different in character. That difference invites reflection about what is actually being valued during travel, and whether another approach could restore flexibility without sacrificing progress. Such patterns accumulate across seasons, shaping expectations, conversations, and planning in ways that feel sensible at the time for most riders. That calculation eventually leads to a different question. When control becomes the priority, Control emerges as the quiet priority when experiences accumulate. Predictability gains value because it preserves options. Riders begin favoring machines that respond the same way each time, regardless of surface or fatigue. Consistency reduces mental load and extends usable days. Output becomes measured by usability. What matters is not peak delivery, but how faithfully intent translates into motion. Repeatable response allows focus to return to terrain and line choice. Progress feels less dramatic, yet more complete. Capability is redefined through repeatability. A machine that performs reliably across varied conditions earns trust through exposure, not promises. Each successful day reinforces preference without fanfare. The shift does not announce itself, it settles in through habit. This change influences purchasing and planning indirectly. Riders look for setups that disappear beneath them. Adjustments become fewer. Familiarity replaces experimentation. Satisfaction comes from knowing what will happen before it happens. Quiet shifts like this rarely make headlines. They spread through shared experience and subtle endorsement. Conversations compare notes, not numbers. Over time, the definition of advancement moves away from escalation toward dependability. That movement aligns with how riding actually unfolds across mixed terrain worldwide, setting context for broader patterns beyond individual choice. It becomes normal through repetition, familiarity, and outcomes that reward calm decisions made consistently over long distances on varied surfaces across changing conditions, without fuss alone. That shift mirrors how most of the world already rides. Riding, where infrastructure is inconsistent. In many riding environments, consistency is the exception rather than the rule. Pavement fades without warning, surfaces change mile to mile, and conditions refuse to stay predictable for long. Mixed terrain becomes the baseline, not a special feature. Riders move from smooth tarmac to broken asphalt, gravel, dirt, and back again within the same stretch of road. Design choices that assume uniform conditions struggle here, because adaptability matters more than optimization. Variable speeds reinforce this reality. Traffic patterns, surface quality, and visibility dictate pace more than posted limits. Riders accelerate and decelerate repeatedly, adjusting to what the road allows rather than what the machine prefers. Smooth power delivery and stable behavior matter more than peak capability, because control must be maintained across constant transitions. Support is rarely close at hand. Long distances separate towns, workshops, and replacement parts. A minor issue can become a trip-defining problem if it cannot be addressed on the spot. Under these conditions, reliability outweighs refinement. A motorcycle that continues operating despite dust, heat, vibration, and neglect earns loyalty through performance that is unremarkable but dependable. Design priorities respond to these constraints. Optimization for narrow scenarios loses relevance when versatility determines success. Machines that tolerate inconsistency become the default choice, not because they excel in one environment, but because they function acceptably in all of them. That reality reshapes expectations and influences how owners evaluate value over time. Ownership changes under these conditions. Why simpler ownership wins long-term? Ownership takes on different meaning when conditions remain unpredictable. Fewer dependencies reduce exposure to interruption. Systems that rely on constant calibration or specialized tools create friction when distance separates riders from formal support. Simpler arrangements lower the threshold for continued travel, allowing riders to address minor problems without halting progress. Field fixes become practical when access is limited. Straightforward components can be inspected, adjusted, or replaced with basic tools and local resources. This capability shortens downtime and preserves momentum. The ability to resolve issues independently becomes part of the ownership experience, shaping trust between rider and machine. Long-term burden matters more than initial performance. Maintenance intervals, parts availability, and service complexity accumulate over years. A motorcycle that demands frequent attention extracts cost in time and planning, not just money. Lower burden translates into more riding and fewer interruptions, reinforcing perceived value. Durability emerges as a form of performance. Components chosen for longevity reduce the need for replacement and adaptation. Wear becomes predictable rather than surprising. Over time, owners recognize that endurance delivers greater satisfaction than optimization ever could. The machine remains present, ready, and familiar across seasons. This pattern shifts purchasing priorities. Riders favor designs that minimize dependency and maximize resilience. Simpler ownership becomes a competitive advantage, not a compromise. That advantage extends beyond individual preference, influencing who can participate and how easily they can begin. Access matters as much as performance. If you want to stay ahead of where adventure motorcycles are heading in 2026 and beyond, subscribe now. Upcoming breakdowns focus on real riding, real design shifts, and choices that determine far and confidently you travel today. Who gets included by design? Design decisions determine participation long before a ride begins. Physical dimensions act as gatekeepers, shaping who feels welcome and who feels excluded. Seat height, reach, and balance influence whether a rider approaches a machine with confidence or hesitation. When access requires constant effort, participation narrows. Energy management over time becomes critical. Riding is cumulative, not isolated. A machine that demands constant exertion reduces endurance across long days. Fatigue alters judgment and shortens journeys. Designs that conserve energy extend usable riding hours and allow recovery between days, making travel sustainable rather than exhausting. Lowering barriers expands participation. When more riders can manage their machines comfortably, the community broadens. Experience levels diversify and usage patterns evolve. Riding shifts from occasional challenge to regular practice, integrated into daily life rather than reserved for special occasions. Sustainability emerges from inclusion. Machines that accommodate a wider range of riders remain relevant longer. They adapt to changing circumstances, aging bodies, and evolving priorities. Ownership persists because the motorcycle continues to fit its rider, not because the rider adapts endlessly to it. These effects are observable in sales, usage, and retention. Models that welcome rather than test their owners maintain consistent presence on the road. Participation becomes routine instead of aspirational. This pattern does not go unnoticed by manufacturers tracking engagement and longevity across markets. Manufacturers noticed this pattern, the platform advantage. Industry responses often begin with consolidation. One machine serving many roles reduces complexity for both producers and owners. A platform that supports commuting, travel, and exploration without extensive modification gains efficiency. Shared components streamline production while maintaining flexibility in application. Regional adaptability strengthens this approach. Adjustments in suspension, gearing, or equipment tailor a platform to local conditions without altering its core. This flexibility allows manufacturers to address varied environments using a common foundation. The result is broader reach with controlled variation. Adoption increases when a single platform meets multiple needs. Dealers manage inventory more effectively. Owners recognize value in versatility. The machine becomes a solution rather than a statement, fitting into different lives without demanding specialization. Risk reduction follows. Investment concentrates on proven architectures, lowering exposure to niche failures. Feedback loops tighten as usage data accumulates across contexts. Incremental improvement replaces radical overhaul, stabilizing development cycles and encouraging long-term commitment. This logic reshapes design priorities. Platforms evolve to emphasize balance, resilience, and adaptability. Engineering choices align with sustained use rather than isolated benchmarks. As these patterns solidify, attention shifts upstream toward foundational decisions that support versatility from the outset. This forced a change in engineering priorities, redefining performance from the ground up. Performance is being redefined from the ground up by priorities that favor balance over peak figures. Engineers focus on how a motorcycle behaves across an entire day, not during a brief test window. Torque is shaped for the ranges riders actually use, allowing steady progress without demanding constant attention. This approach reduces fatigue and keeps response consistent as conditions change. Stability now comes from geometry rather than mass or spectacle. Steering angles, wheel placement, and suspension relationships are tuned to keep movement predictable when surfaces vary. The goal is not to impress on paper, but to maintain composure when inputs arrive late or uneven. Predictable behavior builds trust through repetition, allowing riders to settle into a rhythm that lasts. These choices shift development conversations. Instead of asking how much more can be added, teams ask what can be removed without harming function. Each component must justify itself through contribution to stability and control. When everything works together, performance feels calm rather than urgent. The result is capability that reveals itself over time. Riders notice fewer surprises and fewer moments that demand correction. Progress becomes smoother, and days extend without drama. That definition of performance aligns with how motorcycles are actually used across mixed conditions. From that foundation, decisions about support systems follow naturally, guided by the same restraint and clarity. Field feedback keeps those priorities honest. Electronics follow the same logic. Assistance without distraction. Assistance is being reconsidered with an emphasis on staying out of the way. Systems exist to support control, not replace judgment. When technology operates quietly, riders keep attention on terrain and traffic rather than interfaces. Fewer layers reduce distraction and shorten the path between intention and response. Designers prioritize functions that intervene only when necessary. Subtle modulation replaces aggressive correction. The objective is transparency, where support is felt through absence rather than presence. When a system behaves predictably, trust builds without explanation, and riding remains fluid. Reducing layers improves reliability. Each additional sensor or dependency introduces another point of failure. Simplified architectures tolerate vibration, weather, and neglect more gracefully. Over long ownership periods, fewer interruptions translate into greater confidence and lower maintenance burden. Ownership confidence grows when behavior remains consistent over time. Riders learn what to expect, and expectations are met repeatedly. That familiarity encourages regular use and deeper familiarity with the machine. Technology becomes a background partner rather than a focal point. As these approaches mature, results speak through durability and satisfaction. Time will separate durable solutions from short-lived experiments across ownership cycles. Those outcomes influence purchasing, recommendations, long-term platform investment decisions made by riders and dealers everywhere today. Not every brand solved this the same way. Productive fragmentation. Diversity within the segment reflects problem-solving rather than disagreement. Different layouts address different needs without claiming universal superiority. Some emphasize smooth delivery, others prioritize simplicity, and many balance trade-offs deliberately. No single configuration answers every use case. Regional tuning reinforces this diversity. Climate, surface quality, and usage patterns influence setup choices. Manufacturers adjust suspension, gearing, and components to align with local expectations. These variations are practical responses, not contradictions. Without a single benchmark, learning accelerates. Iteration replaces imitation. Feedback arrives from many contexts, revealing strengths and weaknesses early. Designs evolve through exposure rather than theory, improving relevance over time. This environment encourages experimentation within bounds. Proven foundations support variation while limiting risk. Ideas that perform well spread organically, while others fade without controversy. Progress becomes incremental and cumulative. Such fragmentation remains productive because it stays connected to use. Riders compare experiences rather than specifications. Conversations focus on outcomes, not claims. Over time, patterns emerge that guide refinement without forcing uniformity. As evidence accumulates, certain solutions demonstrate durability across conditions. They persist because they work repeatedly, not because they dominate attention. Longevity becomes the signal that matters most. Market response sharpens selection as demand rewards consistency and penalizes novelty that fails under routine ownership conditions over years' time. Manufacturers adjust portfolios accordingly, trimming overlap and reinforcing architectures that travel well across varied roles for riders everywhere consistently. Some solutions will last. Why this direction persists. Persistence comes from alignment between design and behavior. Feedback loops tighten when products are used regularly across varied situations. Information flows from riders to dealers and engineers, shaping revisions that matter in daily use. Decisions follow evidence rather than projection. Behavior shapes markets quietly. When riders choose machines that deliver predictable days, demand shifts without announcements. Sales reflect usage patterns, and those patterns influence future development. Usability defines value because it determines how often a motorcycle leaves the garage. Riding decisions drive outcomes over time. Choices about routes, distances, and frequency accumulate into signals manufacturers cannot ignore. Products that support consistent use remain present, while others recede despite attention. Longevity becomes proof. This direction persists because it aligns incentives. Riders gain reliability and reach. Producers gain stable platforms and clearer development paths. Dealers gain products that satisfy over long ownership cycles. The ecosystem reinforces itself. Because alignment remains stable, investments compound, tooling persists, and lessons carry forward instead of resetting with each model cycle across years of production and real use. As long as riders keep choosing reliability and ease, the market reinforces designs that respect everyday travel over spectacle in mixed conditions across long distances consistently. Recognition follows without slogans. Adventure was never about excess. It was about freedom that holds up when conditions change. That freedom depends on trust, built through repetition, adaptability, and honest performance that endures beyond novelty. Big machines will always have their place, but the future is moving toward bikes you can ride longer, handle easier, and trust when the road stops cooperating. If you felt that shift in your own rides, more planning, fewer spontaneous turns, say it in the comments, and tell us what you're riding and why. If this breakdown helped, hit like so more riders see it, and subscribe for the next video. Ride smart, stay curious, and keep the wheels turning.